Reborn, my sister's husband brought a courtesan home. I didn't defend her this time. Let her stay gentle and unbothered. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. Yuhui, your eldest sister is frail and has the purest, kindest heart. Now that the Shui family is bullying her like this, can you, as her younger sister, just stand by and watch? I heard the harsh, tearful reproach of my stepmother, Lady Chui, ringing in my ears, so sharp it felt like a fine needle piercing deep into my temples. I snapped my eyes open, and my vision shifted from blurry to clear. Before me stood the familiar rosewood screen inlaid with marble from the Yao family's reception hall. The teacup adorned with a lotus scroll pattern on the table was still giving off wispy plumes of steam. I actually survived. There were no more punches and kicks from that violent widower, as there had been in my previous life just before I died, nor the bone-chilling mud floor of the woodshed. Everything before my eyes was so clean it seemed almost unreal. Mother, please don't worry just yet. Let's see what my brother-in-law has to say. I pinched the palm of my hand, forcing myself to suppress the storm raging inside me, and my voice remained perfectly calm, without a hint of emotion. At that moment, two people were standing in the center of the reception hall. Standing ramrod straight was my elder sister's husband, Shui Xingheng, the crown prince of the Yong'an Marquis' house, who had been married for less than half a year. Today, he wore a moon-white robe trimmed with gold thread. He was exceptionally handsome, though his slightly upturned, almond-shaped eyes were now filled with guilt and impatience. At his side, a woman with a delicate figure was nestled close to him. She wore an extremely simple moonshadow gauze skirt, with only a white jade hairpin in her hair. Her face was pale, and her large, clear eyes, like autumn waters, were filled with fear and grievance as she clutched Shui Xingheng's sleeve tightly. This woman was by Jia Qiao, a courtesan from the Red Phoenix Pavilion in the red light district who had made a name for herself throughout the capital. Mother-in-law, although Qiao Qiao has had a difficult upbringing, she is of noble character. She is now carrying our son's child, and the doctor says it is highly likely to be a boy. The Ho family has few heirs, and my son cannot stand by and watch his own flesh and blood be cast out to the outer city. Shui Xingheng took a deep breath and bowed slightly to Lady Chui, though his words were laced with a stubborn, unyielding determination that brooked no refusal. Outrageous! Xingheng, your eldest sister has only been married for half a year, and yet you've brought someone back from a place like that, and she's pregnant, too. What have you done to the reputation of our Yao family? And what about your eldest sister? Mrs. Chui was shaking with rage. She slammed her hand down on the small table, causing the teacups to rattle. Yao Wanqing, the eldest legitimate sister sitting nearby, finally made a move. She slowly raised her head. Her delicate, composed face showed not a trace of anger, only a hint of heartbreaking sorrow. She gently dabbed at the corner of her eye with a handkerchief, wiping away tears that weren't even there, her voice as soft as a spring breeze brushing against one's face. Mother, please stop blaming my husband. Since my husband loves Miss Bai, and she has borne the Marquis' child, it is only right for me, as his lawful wife, to be magnanimous. I feel no sense of injustice. As long as my husband still holds this family dear in his heart, I can endure anything. Just look at that, once again, that serene, unassuming demeanor, as pure as a chrysanthemum. In my past life. It was at this very moment, as I watched her shed tears of grievance, that I felt my eldest sister was the kindest and most pitiable person in the world. A surge of reckless courage welled up within me, and I rushed over to tear Bai Qiaoqiao's fox fur coat to shreds. I even took the matter to court, dragging Shui Xingheng's reputation through the mud. In the end, thanks to my headlong charge into battle, Yao Wanqing secured her position as a virtuous and noble wife, earning the praise of the entire world, while I, on the other hand, was branded a spiteful and shrewish woman of the household, ultimately rejected by my father and hastily married off to that widower who had taken my life. Yuhui, you're usually so quick-witted, why are you so quiet today? Hurry up and say something on your eldest sister's behalf. Seeing that I wasn't moving, Mrs. Chui furrowed her brows tightly, her eyes brimming with displeasure and impatience. In the past, whenever Yao Yuhui was wronged, all it took was a few glances between Mrs. Chui and her daughter, and I would charge into battle for them like a mad dog. In their eyes, the dignity and reputation of a concubine's daughter were worthless, they were meant to be used as stepping stones. At that moment, Yao Yuhui also turned her head slightly to look at me, her clear eyes holding a faint hint of suggestion and anticipation. She let out a long sigh, her tone subtle yet every word carefully chosen to put me on the spot. Second sister, you've always been quick-witted, but Miss Bai is with child. As women, we must always respect heaven's virtue of nurturing life. We must not under any circumstances earn a reputation for being harsh. Don't you agree? She's trying to get me to take the fall here. She wants me to step up and play the bad guy by kicking Bai Qiao out, while she keeps her reputation as a compassionate bodhisattva who cherishes all life. I sneered inwardly, but on my face I wore an extremely meek smile. Following her lead, I bent my knees slightly and spoke softly. Eldest sister truly has the heart of a bodhisattva. Such magnanimity and grace truly put this younger sister to shame. Since you've spoken, elder sister, and feel no sense of injustice, then mother and I naturally have no further cause to speak. After all, the heirs of the Marquis's household are of the utmost importance, and your reputation for virtue is even more so. As soon as those words were spoken, an eerie silence fell over the reception hall for a moment. The vulnerable expression on Yao Yuhui's face suddenly froze. She seemed taken aback that I, who was usually quick to take offense, would today go along with it, even going so far as to hoist her up into the air. Mrs. Chui was also stunned, her shrewd eyes fixed intently on me, as if trying to detect a hint of sarcasm in my expression, but I kept my head bowed, my demeanor as submissive as could be. Yuhui, what nonsense are you spouting? Mrs. Chui snapped through clenched teeth, her voice low and stern. Mother-in-law, my second younger sister's words are truly reasonable. Shui Xingheng, however, seemed to have grasped at a lifeline. His eyes lit up, and he hurriedly picked up on what I'd said. Yuhui, I knew you were the most considerate and sensible of all. I haven't spoiled you in vain. Rest assured, once Qiao enters the household, she'll never dare to take precedence over you, and the children she bears will call you mother for generations to come. Upon hearing this, Bai Qiao, displaying extraordinary tact, knelt with a thud before Yao Yuhui. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke in a soft, delicate voice, filled with endless grievance and submission. Every single mistake is this lowly concubine's fault. I dare not ask for a formal status. As long as I can serve the crown prince and the young lady, I would gladly be a slave or a maid. The young lady's magnanimity is such that she is truly like a second mother to this lowly concubine. Yao Yuhui looked down at Bai Qiao, who was kneeling at her feet, her hands hidden in her sleeves, clutching a handkerchief so tightly that her fingernails were almost digging into her flesh. Her original plan had been to have me seize the opportunity to make a big deal out of this, so that Shui Xingheng would be forced to compromise out of fear of the Yao family's influence. But now that I've taken a hands-off approach, and even repeatedly praised her magnanimity, if she were to change her tune and persist in her demands, the persona she's painstakingly cultivated for over a decade, that of a woman who neither strives nor competes, as serene as a chrysanthemum, would collapse completely. Miss Bai, please get up quickly. The doctor said you've had a miscarriage. You mustn't overexert yourself like this. Yao Yuhui practically ground these words out through clenched teeth as she stood up to help Bai Qiao to her feet, though her body trembled slightly from the extreme effort she was putting into restraining her emotions. She turned her head, her eyes finally filled with a genuine sense of resentment, and stared intently at me, as if she were meeting me, her half-sister, for the very first time. I met her gaze and smiled even more innocently. In my past life, I risked my life to fight for you, only to be met with your contempt. In this life, since you prefer not to compete, I, as your younger sister, will grant you your wish and let you firmly hold on to that reputation for being virtuous and magnanimous. Madame Chui sat to one side, her face alternating between pale and ashen. She shot me a fierce glare, knowing that I had completely cut off any possible way out for her today. The Yao family values its reputation above all else. since their legitimate daughter herself had accepted this marriage of convenience. If they were to make a scene now, it would only make the Yao family appear lax in their upbringing and their daughter seem hypocritical. Very well. Since Wan Qing thinks it's appropriate, then we'll naturally have to wait until the master returns from court to make a decision on this matter. Mrs. Cui rubbed her temples and coldly uttered those words. Upon hearing this, Shui Xingheng was overjoyed. He bowed repeatedly and, taking Bai Qiao by the hand, sat down with her on a nearby chair. Bai Qiao obediently kept her head bowed, but a fleeting glint of triumph flashed in her eyes, hidden beneath her long lashes. She was an ambitious woman. How could she possibly be content to remain merely an unnamed, unrecognized concubine? Meanwhile, Yao Wanqing sat above, watching the two of them exchange flirtatious glances. Her face as pale as a corpse. She felt restless and unnerved. She instinctively picked up her teacup, but her hands were shaking so violently that the scalding tea spilled directly onto the hem of her skirt. Oh my! How could my eldest sister be so careless? I exclaimed in surprise, quickly standing up and walking over as if to help her wipe it off, but speaking in a subtle tone loud enough for the entire flower hall to hear. Mother, my eldest sister must have lost her composure out of joy that my brother-in-law has taken a concubine. After all, we Yao family daughters value nothing more than ensuring our husband's line continues. When father returns from court, he's sure to praise my eldest sister highly. At the mere mention of the word father, Yao Wanqing froze solid. She knew her father, Yao Chongli, all too well. He was a man who valued a scholar's reputation more than his own life. If he found out that she had secretly agreed to something so disgraceful to the family name just to maintain her reputation as a virtuous woman, he would never let her off easily. Yao Wanqing looked at Mrs. Cui as if seeking help, but Mrs. Cui was just as at a loss at that moment. The mother and daughter exchanged glances, both with a hint of panic in their eyes, while I, the one who had caused all this, was calmly making my way back to my seat, quietly waiting for my father's return. Before dusk had even fallen, the black lacquered palanquin canopy, engraved with cloud patterns, belonging to my father, Yao Chongli, came to a steady halt in front of the ornate gate. Returning from court, my father's expression was so somber it seemed as if water might drip from it. His official boots struck the blue-glazed bricks with a series of muffled thuds, each louder than the last. The moment he stepped into the reception hall, everyone inside rose to their feet in unison. Shui Xingheng instinctively wiped the frivolity from his face and stood respectfully with his hands at his sides. Absurd! Utterly absurd! My father abruptly flicked his sleeve, slamming a copy of the censor's indictment from his lap down hard on the table. The impact sent the white porcelain paperweight rolling off and shattering. His hawk-like eyes darted back and forth between Shui Xingheng and Bai Qiao several times before finally fixing intently on the face of his elder sister, Yao Wanqing. As a daughter of the Yao family and the wife of the crown prince of the Yong'an Marquis household, is this how you preserve the dignity of both families in the eyes of outsiders? As it turned out, Shui Xingheng's high-profile act of having a courtesan from Hongwan Pavilion carried out of the red light district in a palanquin had long since become the subject of much ridicule in today's report to the censorate. Yao Wanqing shuddered at her father's words, and her eyes instantly welled up with tears. She habitually tilted her head slightly to the side, her clear, tear-filled eyes glancing in my direction as they always did, her fingertips twisting the handkerchief over and over, clearly waiting for me to burst out and yell at my father as I usually did, taking full blame for this catastrophic disaster and pinning it on the ignorant, headstrong, and troublesome concubine's daughter. Not only did I not step forward, but I actually took a half step back behind Mrs. Cui without anyone noticing, bowed my head very low, and put on an air of panic and timidity typical of a young lady meeting a man from outside her family, her brother-in-law, for the first time. Qing'er, your father is asking you a question. Why are you just staring at your younger sister? Mrs. Cui was growing impatient. Seeing that I was as dull and unresponsive as a clay figurine today, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and give Yao Wanqing a sharp tug, trying to cover for her daughter. Master, Qing'er is simply concerned for the bloodline of the Marquis' household. That Bai woman is carrying Xingheng's child. If this turns into a scandal, people outside might say that our Yao family is so jealous we can't tolerate our own offspring. Bloodline? What kind of lowly bastard's bloodline is this? Does it even deserve to be discussed on the desk of a high-ranking court official? My father, seething with rage, burst into bitter laughter as he pointed his finger at Shui Xingheng's nose and shouted, "Your Highness, if the Yongnan Marquis' household is short on grandsons, you're more than welcome to take a legitimate concubine from a respectable family through proper marriage. Today, you've degraded yourself by bringing a prostitute through the gates of the Yao family. Do you really think Yao Chongli, the Assistant Minister of Personnel, am just a figurehead who'll let your two families treat me this way?" Shui Xingheng's face alternated between pale and ashen as he was berated, but out of fear of his father's influence in the Ministry of Personnel, he dared not openly defy him and could only turn to Yao Wanqing for help. Yao Wanqing could see that I was completely out of the picture today, and that her mother's defense had been flatly rejected by her father. If she didn't grit her teeth and live up to her reputation as virtuous and magnanimous, not only would Shui Xingheng be held in her father's disfavor today, but she herself would lose all favor in the eyes of her new husband. She took a deep breath, lifted the hem of her skirt, and knelt with a thud at her father's feet. Her voice was sorrowful yet resolute. "Father, please calm your anger. My husband failed to exercise due diligence in the imperial court. As his lawful wife, Qing'er is willing to take the blame in his stead. Though Miss Bai comes from a life of prostitution, it is true that she is with child. Qing'er does not wish to be a wicked woman who, out of jealousy, harms an innocent child. I, Qing'er, am willing to personally host a ceremony to formally welcome Miss Bai as a concubine, so that the 100 families of the capital may see that the daughters of the Yao family are the most virtuous, upholding the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, and are by no means as disgraceful as the rumors suggest." Her act of kneeling and pleading, so full of righteous conviction, effectively choked the rest of her father's scolding right in its tracks. My father bears the heavy burden of his family's prestigious reputation. Now that word has spread, if we were to force the woman out or cause her to miscarry, the Yao family's reputation would only be further tarnished by the hypocritical moralists at the censorate. Now that Yao Wanqing has voluntarily requested a grand ceremony to welcome the new concubine, using her dignity and virtue as the legitimate wife to quell the rumors circulating outside, it is, in a way, a risky yet strategic move to sacrifice the pawn to save the king. "You really are magnanimous." My father stared at her for a long moment. A complex expression flashed in his eyes, and then he gave a cold snort, which served as his tacit approval of the show of decorum. "Eldest sister is truly a heroine among women. With such magnanimity, Yuhui is utterly in awe of her." Seizing the opportunity, I stepped forward, offering her a level of respect I had never shown her in either of my 2 lifetimes, and said earnestly to my father and Lady Chui, "Father, since eldest sister is determined to preserve the reputations of both families, this banquet to welcome the concubine must not only be held, but invitations must be sent far and wide. This will allow all the ladies of the capital to see for themselves what a gentle and unassuming person my eldest sister is, as serene as a chrysanthemum, never vying or competing. Only in this way will the censorate be unable to file a formal complaint, and father's reputation in the court will rise even higher." Every word I spoke struck right at the heart of what my father valued most, reputation. He gave me an approving look and nodded. "That girl Yuhui has spoken some sensible words today. Qing'er, now that you've made your intentions known, you must handle matters at the Marquis' mansion with the utmost care and precision. Don't bring shame upon the Yao family." Yao Wanqing knelt on the ground, looking up at my face, which was full of reverence and envy, so furious she nearly ground her silver teeth to dust. She had originally intended to put on a magnanimous front behind closed doors at home, so that father could go to the Marquis' mansion to exert pressure and secure more benefits for her as the head of the household. But now, with me having raised the stakes and father having applied pressure, if this concubine welcoming banquet wasn't held on a grand scale, it would only make it seem as though she, Yao Wanqing, was putting on a sham. Bai Qiao sat to one side. Her body, which had been tense, instantly relaxed upon hearing the words of grand banquet to welcome a new concubine. She shrewdly buried her head in Shui Xingheng's embrace and sobbed softly. "Young master, since the young mistress has treated me so generously, even if I have to work myself to the bone, I will protect her from now on." Shui Xingheng was overjoyed. He felt that today's visit to the Yao family had been well worth it. He bowed repeatedly to his father to assure him. Then, using Mrs. Bai's illness as an excuse, hurriedly took his party and took his leave. In the parlor, only the members of the Yao family remained. Mrs. Chui was so furious she clutched her chest, slammed her hand down on the table, and, pointing her finger right at my nose, shouted, "Yao Yuhui! Your eldest sister is in trouble now, and instead of figuring out how to help your brother-in-law put that seductress in her place, you're actually fanning the flames here. What on earth are you up to? Mother, you're wronging your daughter," I said, blinking with a look of the most innocent fear in my eyes. I merely heard my eldest sister repeatedly say she feels no grievance and must be virtuous. I've always looked up to her as a role model, so naturally I wanted to help her spread that reputation. Besides, Father's reputation in the imperial court is as high as the heavens. How could I possibly let my eldest sister's momentary outburst of anger ruin Father's career? My father was changing into his official robes behind a folding screen. Upon hearing my words, he rebuked Lady Chui in a stern voice. "Enough! That's how a lady should behave." Today, Yuhui acted with proper decorum, far more considerate of the greater good than Qing'er's self-proclaimed clever scheme. "The matter is settled. Qing'er, return to the Marquis's mansion tomorrow to prepare for the banquet. Make sure it's a grand affair." Yao Yuhui stood up from the ground, her legs so wobbly she nearly stumbled. She stared intently at me, and for the first time, a ripple of fear flickered deep in her eyes. She realized that her half-sister, who had once been ready to tear apart every injustice in the world the moment she shed a tear, was now looking at her with eyes as cold as a still, lifeless pool. I gave the mother and daughter a faint smile, performed a proper lady's curtsy, and then, supported by a maidservant, returned to the side courtyard. The banquet to welcome the new concubine was set for half a month later, and the Marquis of Yong'an's mansion sent out invitations far and wide for the occasion. To uphold her reputation for purity, described as serene as a chrysanthemum, Yao Yuhui, despite her illness, personally drafted the menu and selected the fabrics. She even personally oversaw the preparation of the pale pink bridal gown that Bai Qiaqiao would wear upon entering the household. The more she appeared unambitious and uncompetitive, the more the virtuous families outside praised the upbringing of the Yao family's daughters. But only I know just how maddening it is to be put on a pedestal like this. On the day of the banquet, the entrance to the Marquis of Yong'an's mansion was bustling with carriages and horses. As soon as I stepped into the mansion's reception hall with Lady Chui, I saw Yao Yuhui sitting, pale-faced, among a group of noble women. Although the matriarchs of those distinguished families paid her lip service, praising her virtue and grace, the flashes of sarcasm and pity in their eyes struck her haughty face as hard as a slap. Just as the banquet was reaching its midpoint and everyone was preparing to present tea to the magnanimous crown prince's consort, a piercing scream suddenly rang out from the rear courtyard, shattering the festive atmosphere in the front hall. A shriek echoed from the side courtyard to the flower hall, causing the noble women, who had been toasting one another, to set down their white jade cups in unison. Shui Xingheng's expression changed. Without even bothering to address the guests present, he grabbed the hem of his robe and hurried toward the rear courtyard. Madame Chui frowned and followed closely behind him, anxious for his safety, while Yao Yuhui sat frozen in the seat of honor, the color draining completely from her face in an instant. I stood up and, quite naturally, reached out to take Yao Yuhui's arm. Lowering my voice, I whispered gently in her ear, "Big sister, Miss Bai is staying in this side courtyard. Today is her grand wedding day, and with so many matrons from prominent families watching, we mustn't compromise our mistress's dignity. We'd better go take a look." Yao Yuhui turned her head to look at me. Her eyes, which had once been clear and bright, were now brimming with seething hatred. But with more than a dozen pairs of eyes in the foyer fixed on her, she had no choice but to maintain her aloof, chrysanthemum-like composure. Leaning on my hand, she stood up and offered a forced, dry smile to the crowd. By the time everyone rushed to the west wing, the courtyard was already in complete chaos. Bai Qiaqiao lay limp on the blue brick floor. Her meticulously tailored pink bridal gown was caked in mud and dust. Her hair was disheveled, and she was clutching her stomach, weeping as if her tears were falling like raindrops from a pear blossom. Standing beside her, with stern expressions, were several elderly matrons who were usually feared throughout the Marquis's mansion. They held several yellowed pieces of paper in their hands. Your Highness, you must avenge this lowly concubine. As soon as Bai Chaoqiao saw Shui Xingheng step through the courtyard gate, she immediately threw herself at him with bone-soft grace, clinging desperately to the leg of his boot and weeping so hard she was on the verge of fainting. This lowly concubine knows full well that I come from humble origins. Ever since entering this household, my only wish has been to keep a low profile and serve the young madam faithfully. But the matron attending the young madam actually added cooling safflower to my pregnancy tonic and falsely accused me of having an affair with a stranger. She even wants to throw me into the pond. You bastards! Who gave you the nerve to lay a hand on my woman and my child? Shui Xingheng, overcome with concern, pulled Bai Chaoqiao into his arms and turned to glare at the elderly maids, the veins on his temples bulging. One of the leaders, Matron Qian, a confidant of the old lady of the Marquis's house, heard this and, with neither humility nor arrogance, gave a slight curtsy. She held out the slip of paper in her hand toward Shui Xingheng and said in a steady voice, "Please calm your anger, young Marquis. We did not arrest this woman without cause. Today, while the servants were airing out the bedding in the West Wing, they found these items sewn into the lining of Ms. Bai's pillow. These are all sentimental poems and erotic verses written to Ms. Bai by former patrons of the Red Phoenix Pavilion. The lady of the house has stated that the Marquis's household absolutely cannot allow a woman of dubious background and impure intentions to bring dishonor to our family name." Shui Xingheng snatched the notes from her hands. After just a quick glance, his face turned from pale to purple. He knew that handwriting all too well. They were all flirtatious messages written to Bai Chaoqiao by those good-for-nothing ne'er-do-wells in the capital, some of which had been signed as recently as half a month ago. At that moment, Yao Yuhui slowly walked forward, supported by me. She looked at Bai Chaoqiao on the ground. A fleeting glimmer of satisfaction flashed in her eyes, but she immediately put on that magnanimous, compassionate expression and stepped forward to gently, "My lord, please do not lose your temper. Miss Bai is pregnant now. We must not disturb the fetus under any circumstances. Since this is grandmother's wish, as the legitimate wife, though I feel pity for Miss Bai, I cannot go against the rules set by our elders. Why not first have Miss Bai stay in the outer quarters? Once the child is born and her lineage is confirmed, we can decide what to do next." What a clever move, retreating to advance. On the surface, Yao Yuhui's words seemed to be out of concern for Bai Chaoqiao, but in reality, they were intended to naturally drive her out of the Marquis's mansion, while also planting a seed of doubt in Shui Xingheng's mind regarding her lineage. In my past life, Bai Chaoqiao was caught with erotic poems at the concubine welcoming banquet. Seeing Yao Yuhui in tears, I assumed she had suffered a tremendous injustice. So I immediately pointed my finger at Bai Chaoqiao in front of everyone and launched into a tirade, calling her a lowly prostitute and a bastard pretending to be something she wasn't. As a result, Shui Xingheng, determined to save face as a man, reacted fiercely, even going so far as to publicly sever ties with the Yao family on the spot to protect Bai Chaoqiao at all costs. In the end, I was left to bear all the blame, while Yao Yuhui, acting sweet and affectionate toward Shui Xingheng afterward, reaped the rewards of a reputation for virtue for nothing. "My dear elder sister, you're quite mistaken." I released the hand I'd been holding to support Yao Yuhui, took a subtle step forward, and spoke to Bai Chaoqiao with a tone full of compassion. "These poems are nothing more than romantic entanglements from the past. Since Miss Bai ended up in a place like the Red Phoenix Pavilion, it's not uncommon for her to have been forced into situations beyond her control. Now that she's with my brother-in-law, she's clearly settled down. If we were to drive out Miss Bai, who's currently with child, just because of a few pieces of paper today, who knows how those literati and scholars out there would spin the story, accusing my brother-in-law of being heartless and unprincipled, and you, elder sister, of being hypocritical and intolerant." Bai Chaoqiao, who was kneeling on the ground, was actually extremely clever. Upon hearing my words, she hurriedly bowed her head as if she'd been granted a pardon. "Second young lady, you're absolutely right, Crown Prince. Ever since I came to serve you, I've been completely devoted to you. Those poems were forced upon me by those well-wishers. In a moment of confusion, I didn't have time to burn them. I absolutely did not have an affair with anyone. Shui Xingheng was already extremely concerned about saving face. As soon as he heard the words heartless and ungrateful, and saw the soft, fragrant beauty in his arms weeping pitifully, the rage burning in his heart immediately shifted direction. He fixed his gaze intently on Yao Wanqing. Wanqing, I've always respected you as a magnanimous and easygoing person. Who else in this side courtyard, aside from your people, could have dug up these old belongings? You keep saying you're not wronged. Yet behind my back you've been inciting the matron by the old lady's side to plant evidence and search for personal belongings. Do you take me for a fool? Husband, how could you slander me like this? Yao Wanqing was struck as if by lightning, and her body shook violently. She never could have imagined that, despite all her careful planning, a single offhand remark from her half-sister would turn all the blame right back on her. Seeing that things were taking a turn for the worse, Mrs. Cui hurried forward to defend her daughter, only to be coldly brushed aside by Shui Xingheng with a wave of his sleeve. This heir to the Marquis's mansion, who usually appeared weak, was now so determined to protect his personal assets and dignity that he didn't even care about his mother-in-law's reaction. He picked up Bai Qiao in his arms and hurled a harsh warning at Yao Wanqing. Whether or not this concubine welcoming banquet takes place today is not up to you. From this day forward, Qiao will hold the token of authority over the household and the keys to the West Wing. If you feel wronged, feel free to go back to the Yao family and complain. Shui Xingheng carried the person away at full speed, leaving behind a courtyard in shambles and a group of noble women staring at one another in disbelief. Yao Wanqing stood rooted to the spot, her fingernails digging deep into the palms of her hands, blood dripping drop by drop through the gaps between her fingers onto her embroidered shoes. She turned her head, her bloodshot eyes fixed intently on me. The hypocrisy and haughtiness that had once filled that gaze were long gone, replaced by nothing but a madness that seemed to want to devour me alive. Amid the commotion filling the courtyard, I gave her an extremely subtle raised eyebrow. Oh, big sister. Oh, big sister, I imagine it must be hard to let go of the reins of the household, isn't it? This is only the beginning. Because of this farce at the home mansion, Yao Wanqing's reputation among the capital's prominent families changed overnight from generous and virtuous to sweet-tongued but treacherous, secretly plotting to harm her stepson. On the ride back in the carriage, Lady Cui berated me mercilessly, but I didn't take a single word to heart. All I could think about was how to use the Yao family's and the Marquis' household's sudden notoriety to completely annul that disgusting betrothal of mine. I can't be the one to bring up breaking off the engagement. I have to let the Fong family, who pride themselves on their noble lineage, be the ones to bring it up. Half a month later, the peach blossoms in the western hills on the outskirts of Beijing were in full bloom, and the young men and women from Beijing's prominent families held a poetry gathering at Qingfeng Pavilion. My nominal fiancé, Fang Shihai, the son of the junior minister of the Supreme Court of Justice, was sure to be in attendance today. I changed into a very plain, light green satin bodice and skirt, took only one personal maid with me, deliberately avoided the Yao family's carriages and horses, and slipped quietly into the rear garden of Qingfeng Pavilion. As I rounded a rockery, by the shimmering lotus pond, the sounds of a man and a woman bantering reached my ears with remarkable clarity, carried by the spring breeze. Young Master Fong, I've heard that the second young lady of the Yao family is rather reserved. She doesn't hold a candle to my sister's gentleness. Not even 1/10 of it. A sweet, coquettish female voice drifted from behind the rockery, even through the thicket of flowers and trees. The undisguised flattery was still evident. I stood in the shadow of a rock, tilting my head slightly to listen. On the stone bench ahead sat my nominal fiancé, Fang Shihai. Today he was dressed in an extremely flashy royal blue brocade robe, clutching a pretentious xiangfei bamboo fan, and was currently holding a woman in a pink gauze skirt close to his chest as he teased her. That woman was none other than Lin Jiaoer, a distant cousin from Fang Shihai's maternal uncle's family. Don't even mention that jinx. Fang Shihai snorted coldly, slamming his fan down on the table, his tone brimming with impatience. The Yao family has been embroiled in such a huge scandal. Their eldest legitimate daughter puts on a show of being unambitious and uncompetitive, but behind the scenes, she's poisoning the concubines with red flowers. Such tactics truly reveal a family with corrupt values. Yao Yuhui is nothing but a concubine's daughter, cowering in the inner quarters all day long, not daring to make a peep. If it weren't for the fact that her father is the vice minister of personnel, this young master wouldn't have bothered to agree to this marriage. Lin Jiao leaned into his embrace, tracing gentle circles on his chest with her fingers, her voice so soft it could have made one weep. But now the Yao family's reputation in the capital is in tatters. If you were to marry her, wouldn't you just be inviting ridicule? Why not ask my aunt to call off this engagement and find a bride from a distinguished family instead? A flicker of greed and calculation crossed Feng Shihai's eyes. Yet he hesitated slightly. Calling off the engagement is all well and good, but if we do so for no reason, it could be trouble if Yao Chongli were to sabotage father at the Ministry of Personnel. We must find a pretext to pin the blame on Yao Yuhui, so that the Yao family loses face and dares not come calling. That would be the best course of action. I stood behind the rockery, watching those two scheming bastards with a cold gaze. In my past life, Yao Wenqing caused an absolute uproar at the Marquis's mansion. In order to cover for her and stand up for her, I earned a reputation outside the household as brash and overbearing. Feng Shihai used this as an excuse to accuse me of moral failings in front of everyone and publicly tore up our marriage contract. At that time, not only did I lose my fiancé, but I also became the laughingstock of the entire capital. Upon returning home, my father slapped me hard across the face, viewing me as a disgrace to the Yao family. In this life, I haven't given them the slightest reason to label me as headstrong. Yet Feng Shihai, unable to sit idly by, has actually taken it upon himself to scheme against me. Young master, what's so difficult about that? Lin Jiao covered her mouth and chuckled softly, a hint of malice flashing in her eyes. The poetry gathering will begin shortly, and the newly appointed compiler of the Hanlin Academy, Lord Liu, will be in attendance. I've heard that Lord Liu is particularly fond of the fairer sex. All we need to do is arrange for Yao Yuhui to chance upon him in a side hall, then have everyone else witness it. At that point, she'll have no choice but to marry him, and your cancellation of the engagement will be perfectly justified. Upon hearing this malicious scheme, far from getting angry, I actually let a faint, amused smile play at the corners of my mouth. That good-for-nothing Feng Shihai really is a godsend. I was just worrying about how to get the Feng family to call off this engagement of their own accord, and with them in the wrong, when he went and set the trap for himself. Now that this is the case, if I don't play along with his plan, it would make me, as his fiancé, look like I'm not considerate enough. I tiptoed out of the rear garden with the young maid, changed direction, and walked right in through the main gate of Qingfeng Pavilion as if it were perfectly natural. By this time, the poetry gathering had already begun, and the flower hall was filled with the young talents of the capital and the noble young ladies of the court. I spotted Feng Shihai at a glance. He was sitting upright among a group of scholars, striking the pose of a literati ready to discuss the state of the nation. When he saw me enter, a fleeting, dark gleam flashed across his eyes, and he then lifted his teacup and whispered a few instructions to a young servant standing beside him. Before long, a maid in a red dress, who looked somewhat unfamiliar to me, came toward me carrying a tray of fruit. As we passed each other, the maid's foot slipped, and the entire tray of plum preserves, dripping with sauce, landed squarely on the hem of my light green skirt. Oh my! Please forgive me, young lady. I deserve to die. The maid fell to her knees with a thud and bowed her head repeatedly. The commotion was quite loud and immediately drew the attention of many people nearby. It's all right. Get up. I smiled gently, without a trace of annoyance, then turned to the Feng family's servant standing beside me and asked, feigning confusion, "Young man, do you know of a clean side chamber in this pavilion where I might change my clothes?" Looking like this, it would be quite inappropriate to meet with all these talented young men. Seeing that I had taken the bait so easily, the young servant's eyes nearly sparkled with delight. He hurriedly bowed low and led the way. Second young lady, please follow me. The listening to bamboo pavilion on the west side is the quietest spot. Clean clothes have already been laid out inside, perfect for you to change into. I brushed a stain off the hem of my skirt and obediently followed him down the long corridor toward the secluded Tingzhu pavilion. With every step, I silently kept track of the time in my mind. Just before stepping through the gate of Tingzhu pavilion, I made up an excuse, claiming I'd left my handkerchief in the flower hall and sent my personal maid back alone, then pushed open the wooden door hidden behind the emerald bamboo. A strange, sweet scent lingered in the room, extremely faint. Anyone who hadn't encountered such sordid practices in the inner quarters during their previous life would have found it nearly impossible to detect. I let out a cold laugh, instinctively covering my mouth and nose with a damp handkerchief, then hurried to the window and propped it open a crack. Through the crack, I saw a man not far away, dressed in official robes, who looked to be in his early 30s and had a somewhat haggard complexion, walking down the path toward me. It was none other than the compiler of the Hanlin Academy whom Feng Shuhai had mentioned, Lord Liu. Not far behind Magistrate Liu, Feng Shuhai was leading several young men from prominent families who had been in the flower hall a short while ago. They were walking toward this direction, laughing and talking loudly while pretending to admire the bamboo. I didn't panic in the slightest. I quickly walked behind the screen inside the room and pulled out the royal blue jade pendant that Lin Jiaoer had slipped into the crevice of the soft couch moments earlier. The pendant was engraved with the Fong family crest. It was the very one Feng Shuhai always wore. Lin Jiaoer must have planted it there in advance, intending it to serve as irrefutable evidence of my illicit affair with Magistrate Liu. Clutching the jade pendant, a cold gleam flashed in my eyes. Then, with a swift movement, I leaped out the window of Tingzhuxian and made my way to a hidden spot in the bamboo grove behind the house. After what felt like a dozen or so breaths, Magistrate Liu pushed open the door and walked in, and almost immediately afterward, the sound of Feng Shuhai and the others laughing and chatting could be heard from outside the door. You may not know this, but the inkwash bamboo paintings at Tingzhuxian are truly exquisite. Several of my colleagues from the Ministry of Justice love to come here to enjoy tea. Feng Shuhai's voice was loud and carried a tone of smug confidence as he pushed open the door to Tingzhuxian with one hand. Is Magistrate Liu inside? I've brought a few colleagues to present him with tea. No sooner had he spoken than a shriek rang out from inside the house, causing Feng Shuhai to fall silent abruptly. What came from inside the room was not the startled cry of a young lady in her boudoir, but a shrill, delicate female voice, intermingled with Magistrate Liu's angry rebuke at being disturbed. Feng Shuhai's expression suddenly froze, and the smug smile that had been playing on his lips vanished instantly. He urgently kicked open the carved wooden door to the inner chamber, and the young men from prominent families behind him surged in after him. I saw the bed curtains part, and the woman who crawled out from behind them, her clothes in disarray, was not me, Yao Yuhui, but Lin Jiaoer, who was supposed to be watching the show in the flower parlor. Jiaoer? How could it be you? Feng Shuhai was struck as if by lightning. He stood frozen in place, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. He had clearly ordered someone just moments ago to bring Yao Yuhui here, so how, in the blink of an eye, had his cousin ended up lying on Magistrate Liu's bed? Magistrate Liu had already donned his official robes, his face ashen. As a newly appointed compiler, he was extremely careful to protect his reputation. Today, he had come to Qingfeng Pavilion on orders to rest, but never expected to be tricked by a woman of unknown origin, and now he had been caught red-handed by Feng Shuhai and his large entourage. Feng Shuhai! What a disgraceful upbringing you've had in the household of the Vice Minister of the Supreme Court. Magistrate Liu slammed his hand down on the table and, pointing his finger at Feng Shuhai's nose, shouted angrily, I came here at your invitation to enjoy some tea. Yet this woman sneaked into the room without permission and behaved in a frivolous manner. And now you've brought men here to force their way in. Are you trying to conspire to frame me? Lin Jiaoer was absolutely terrified at that moment. Clutching her blanket, she wept bitterly and shook her head frantically at Feng Shuhai. Cousin, it's not like that. I clearly saw just now. Sniff. 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 Magistrate Liu, I've been framed. A frame-up? But there are still items belonging to your Fong family in this room. A clear, ringing voice broke the dead silence in the room. I had changed into a clean, moon-white, embroidered magnolia-patterned long dress, and, flanked by my young maids, I walked leisurely into the Tingzhu Pavilion. I held out the royal blue jade pendant engraved with the Fong family crest, my expression a mix of astonishment and a perfectly measured blend of anger and grievance. Young Master Fong, I was just changing my clothes when I saw the maid attending Miss Lin acting suspiciously in the corridor. She dropped this jade pendant of yours. I became suspicious and followed her. I never imagined that you and Miss Lin would be setting up such a sordid trap in the Qingfeng Pavilion of the Grand Princess's mansion to ruin Magistrate Lu's reputation. Every word I spoke pushed Feng Shuhai and Lin Jiao further down a path to their doom. The young men from prominent families present exchanged glances, and their gazes toward Feng Shuhai were instantly filled with contempt. They had originally assumed that Magistrate Lu was at fault for his immoral behavior, but now it was clear that the Feng cousins, with guilty consciences, had attempted to curry favor with the new power brokers using such despicable tactics, only to end up shooting themselves in the foot. Yao Yuhui, you bitch. You set me up. Feng Shuhai was furious and raised his hand to strike me. Stop it! Magistrate Lu snorted coldly, stepping forward to block my path, his eyes brimming with disgust. Feng Shuhai, I will report today's events exactly as they happened to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Justice and the Ministry of Rights. If your Feng family wishes to cover up this scandal, you'd better go and defend yourselves before His Majesty. Feng Shuhai's hands dropped limply to his sides, his face as pale as paper. He knew that not only had his scheme to call off the engagement failed today, but the reputations of both the Feng and Lin families had been utterly ruined right here in Tingzhuxian. Within 3 days, the Feng family, unable to withstand the pressure from all sides, sent a matchmaker in the dead of night to the Yao family's doorstep, carrying a letter of betrothal annulment. Father Yao Chongli sat in the seat of honor. Although he felt his pride had been wounded, he knew the Feng family was in the wrong. Moreover, with the scandal involving Feng Shuhai at Qingfeng Pavilion having spread throughout the capital, Father smashed his teacup on the spot, returned the betrothal document, and even filed a scathing report against Vice Minister Feng with the Ministry of Personnel. I returned to the side courtyard with the letter of engagement annulment in hand, and felt as if a huge weight that had been pressing on my chest for 2 lifetimes had finally been lifted. By withdrawing from the engagement with dignity and integrity, free from the reputation as a shrew I'd borne in my past life, I, Yao Yuhui, could finally take full control of my own future. However, before the Yao family had even had time to recover from the shock of my calling off the engagement, even more earth-shattering news arrived from the Marquis of Yolin's mansion. With me no longer leading the charge, Yao Wanqing's non-confrontational attitude at the Marquis's mansion had completely turned into weakness that invited abuse. Bai Qiaqiao, capitalizing on the child she carried and Shui Xingheng's favoritism, not only seized control of the keys to the inner quarters but even laid her hands on the household funds of the Marquis's estate. Yao Wanqing spent her days huddled in her main chamber, allowing those servile attendants, who flattered the powerful and trampled the weak, to mistreat her. Within just half a month, she had fallen ill and was bedridden, yet she insisted on maintaining that aloof, chrysanthemum-like dignity, shaking her head and sighing to Lady Cui, who had come to visit. Mother, Wanqing feels no sense of injustice. My husband is happy, and Miss Bai is expecting a child. As the legitimate wife, it is only right for me to step aside. As long as the Marquis's mansion remains peaceful, what does it matter if Wanqing is neglected a little? Seeing her daughter so stubborn and clearly suffering, Mrs. Cui was so furious that every organ in her body ached. She had thought that Yao Wanqing could win Shui Xingheng's heart through her magnanimity, but little did she know she had raised nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, Bai Qiaqiao's round belly was growing day by day, and she was running rampant throughout the mansion. Even the old lady had been charmed into favoring her. One day, after days of being treated coldly and having her allowance cut, Yao Wanqing finally reached her breaking point. Despite her illness, she was supported by her maid and, for the first time ever, returned to the Yao family home. As soon as she entered the flower parlor, she saw me sitting on a soft couch by the window, leisurely savoring the newly tribute snow sparrow tea. My complexion was rosy, and my eyes sparkled with vitality. There was not a trace of the dejected appearance one might expect from a woman whose engagement had been broken off. Yao Wanqing's body wavered slightly, and the haughtiness she had feigned for over a decade finally showed a crack. Biting her pale lip, she walked step by step toward me. Second sister, now that you've called off the engagement, things seem to be going quite smoothly for you, Yao Wanqing said hoarsely, her voice tinged with a barely perceptible mix of resentment and exhaustion. But have you ever stopped to think about what kind of life your eldest sister has been enduring at the Marquis's mansion? That Lady Bai has no respect for social hierarchy, now she even dares to withhold my monthly allowance. You're usually the one with all the ideas. Are you really just going to stand by and watch your own older sister be treated so shamefully? Seeing her acting so hypocritically, trying to use her status as the eldest sister to pressure me even when she was backed into a corner. Hoping I'd stand up for her, I slowly set down the white jade cup I was holding. I looked up to meet her eyes, which were filled with scheming and resentment, and a subtle yet icy smile played at the corners of my mouth. Eldest sister, your words truly flatter your younger sister. After all, it was you yourself who once said that as a legitimate wife, one must be magnanimous and must never be seen as petty. Now that Miss Bai manages the inner quarters so efficiently, even my brother-in-law praises you for your virtue. If I were to intervene at this moment, wouldn't I be undermining the dignity and reputation you've upheld your entire life? When Yao Yuhui heard what I said, she couldn't catch her breath and began coughing violently. Her handkerchief was instantly stained with a startling splash of crimson. She pointed at me with all her might, unable to speak for a long moment. Just then, the Yao family's steward came rushing in from outside, practically tumbling as he ran. As soon as he entered the door, he fell to his knees, his face deathly pale, and cried out, "Miss Yao, it's terrible. A messenger from the Marquis's mansion has just arrived with news. Concubine Bai has had a miscarriage. Right now, she's being carried, still covered in blood, to the main gate of our Yao family estate, causing a scene. Concubine Bai had suffered a miscarriage, and her blood-soaked body had been carried right up to the Yao family's front gate." The steward's announcement sent Yao Yuhui's legs buckling. She collapsed to the ground. The front hall instantly descended into chaos. Lady Cui screamed and rushed outside with her attendants, while Yao Yuhui, being pulled along by her maidservants, stumbled along behind them. I calmly smoothed out the wrinkles in my skirt, lingered at the very back of the crowd, and watched this grand spectacle from a distance. The entrance to the Yao family's mansion was already packed with people, leaving not even a gap for a drop of water to pass through. A roofless palanquin stood at the foot of the stone steps, with Bai Qiaqiao lying inside, her face deathly pale. The large bloodstains on her skirt were a shocking sight. Shui Xingheng stood beside the palanquin with his hair in disarray. His shirt showed signs of having been torn, and he appeared to be on the verge of madness. "Yao Yuhui, you venomous woman, get your ass out here. What on earth has come over the crown prince? How dare he act so wildly in public?" Mrs. Cui snapped. "Have I gone mad?" Shui Xingheng pointed at the dying Bai Qiaqiao, his voice hoarse. "You keep saying you won't fight or compete, but behind my back you bribed a maid to slip a full dose of musk into my wife's pregnancy medicine. My son, who was already fully formed, is gone. I'm not going to let this go today." Yao Yuhui cowered behind Mrs. Cui in fear. "My husband, since Sister Bai holds all the household authority, how could I possibly poison her? Are you still going to try to wriggle out of this, young madam?" Bai Qiaqiao struggled to raise herself halfway up, clutching a silver note stamped with her private seal tightly in her hand, crying until her voice was hoarse. "The only thing missing from the inner courtyard's ledgers is the dowry silver from your wedding. If you hadn't used that private funds to pawn some top-quality musk at the apothecary, where else could this poison have come from?" That silver note was one of the private items included in Yao Yuhui's dowry when she married, bearing her maiden name. In my previous life, Bai Qiaqiao had also used this trick to frame someone, but back then, I jumped to conclusions the moment I heard the rumor. I immediately led a group of people to storm the Marquis's mansion, smashed up the courtyard, and publicly uncovered the musk residue from Bai Qiaqiao's self-staged charade, thereby clearing Yao Yuhui of all suspicion. But in this life, without me to fight her battles, Yao Yuhui's accounts had long been secretly tampered with no concrete evidence to support her case. She was left with no way to defend herself. "That's impossible. That banknote was clearly locked away in my dowry chest." Yao Yuhui was struck as if by lightning. "Enough. Let's discuss this back at the mansion. Making a fool of yourself right at the gate, how unbecoming." A stern and furious voice rang out. His father, Yao Chongli, who had just returned from court, was as dark as the bottom of a pot. As the vice minister of personnel, his reputation had been utterly shattered in front of officials and commoners alike. The guards hurriedly ushered the man through the gate, and the heavy vermilion lacquered doors slammed shut amid the pointing and whispering of the onlookers. In the reception hall, the smell of blood and medicine lingered in the air. Father sat on his high seat, his body trembling slightly with anger. Shui Jingheng stood there, refusing to let the matter drop, while Yao Yuhui knelt on the ground, weeping uncontrollably. Father, Qing'er has always respected my husband and cherished Little Bai. I would never do such a terrible thing. Her father kicked her away with a single kick. His eyes filled with disgust, then turned to Shui Jingheng. Your Highness, how do you wish to settle this? A letter of divorce. The House of Yongnan absolutely cannot tolerate such a venomous woman who speaks sweetly but harbors a dagger. Shui Jingheng growled through gritted teeth. In ancient times, being divorced and sent back to her family's home was tantamount to a death sentence. Even Yao Yuhui's reputation, as pure as a chrysanthemum, would be reduced to mud in a gutter. Second sister, please help me. Yao Yuhui suddenly turned her head and fixed her gaze on me as I sat in the corner. Her fingernails dug into the top of my shoe, and her eyes were filled with madness. You're the most eloquent of us all. Please help your older sister investigate this. That banknote must have been stolen by someone else. Please help your older sister explain this. I looked down at her from above, slowly bent over, gently pried her fingers away from my embroidered shoe, and whispered in her ear in a voice that was both subtle and tender. Eldest sister, since little sister Bai has already presented the evidence, and my brother-in-law is so certain, if you persist in arguing endlessly, it will only make it seem as though we Yao family daughters dare to act but not take responsibility for our actions. Why not heed your brother-in-law's words and go along with this arrangement? That way, you'll also preserve your lifelong noble character of neither striving nor vying. After hearing my words, Yao Yuhui froze completely in her tracks. Her eyes filled with utter despair. She finally realized that she would never see her foolish younger sister return to shield her from the blade. Her father did not spare another glance at Yao Yuhui, who was slumped on the ground. His icy gaze swept past Mrs. Cui, who was weeping bitterly, and landed directly on Shui Jingheng, whose face had turned ashen. As a vice minister of personnel with many years of experience in the bureaucracy, he knew all too well how to weigh the pros and cons. If the matter went to court, the Yao family's reputation would be utterly ruined, whereas a letter of divorce would serve as the last shred of dignity to save the honor of both families. Your Highness, divorcing your wife would undermine the original intent of the marriage alliance between our two families. If the two families insist on letting matters come to a head, I fear the Marquis will not fare well with the censorate. My father picked up the cold tea on the table to clear his throat. His tone was calm, yet every word carried a threat. It would be better to change the divorce to an amicable separation. To the outside world, we'll simply say that Yuhui has fallen seriously ill and needs to return to her maternal home for recuperation. As for Lady Bai, the Yao family will, of course, provide a generous sum of silver for medicinal herbs as a token of compensation. What do you think, Crown Prince? Shui Jingheng suppressed his seething anger and glanced at the terms for the separation of interests between the two families handed to him by the chief of staff. He knew this was the greatest concession Yao Yuhui could make. If he were to force the issuance of a divorce decree, the retaliation from the vice minister of personnel was more than the Yongnan Marquis' household could currently withstand. He snorted coldly, snatched the divorce decree from the chancellor's hands, and strode away without looking back. His soft palanquin, with its white, upturned eaves, disappearing along with him beyond the Yao family's imposing vermilion lacquered gates. Yao Yuhui watched helplessly as the divorce decree was finalized. Her face turned ashen. The pride and aloofness that had once made her the envy of the capital were completely shattered into a pile of rubble, and she was dragged back to the inner courtyard by a wailing Mrs. Cui, where she was placed under house arrest. I watched all these events unfold with a cold detachment, completely unfazed. In this lifetime, I have completely shattered the clay mask I wore to shield others from the storms, toppled Yao Yuhui from her pedestal, and cleared my name from the Fong family's schemes. From now on, the Yao family's wealth and honor, as well as my eldest sister's haughty fate, have nothing to do with me, a concubine's daughter living in a side courtyard. Leaning against my bolster, I listened to the sound of hooves gradually fading from my ears. My heart as clear and serene as the warm spring sunshine. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.